Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me in another conversation around advocacy with Food Recovery Network. This is a series of conversations that we're hosting to provide more content, more context, more on-ramps for everyone all across the network when we think about this concept of advocacy and how we can use advocacy to shape our food recovery efforts and to make the world more equitable. Um, We've had a series of really incredible conversations that if you haven't had a chance to listen in on them, I highly recommend. We had a really great conversation with Robert Egger about, why he decided advocacy was this place and space for him when he started DC Central Kitchen, when he started the Campus Kitchens Project, which Food Recovery Network, we have a long history with Campus Kitchens, and many of you out there, had a Campus Kitchens project and you came into the fold of Food Recovery Network to continue your food recovery efforts. Incredible conversation. We had a conversation about voting in general and the feelings that people have when we think about voting. Maybe some people are feeling that voting, it's how do we do it? Where do we go? Some people maybe are feeling it's really difficult to vote, to know how to vote, to know when to vote. And so we talked about just the emotions that many of us carry around voting so that we could be transparent about that and hopefully see ourselves in taking small steps into becoming active voters. Recently, we had a conversation with the World Wildlife Fund, incredible conversation, and that conversation talked all about Congress and how we could get to know our elected officials, just again, a little bit out of a time, so that we can feel more equipped to advocate for the things that matter most to us. Um, it's all about creating on-ramps, no matter where you're at in terms of your focus, whether your focus is advocacy on your college campus, in your larger community, for your state, and for many of you at the federal level, that's exactly where you need to be. But we want to provide just more content, more understanding, more conversation around advocacy so that we can see lots of on-ramps so that we can be more effective when we think about advocacy in our actions. I'm really excited to introduce everyone off screen, but Kimmy Kutzler has been so instrumental in helping with all of these conversations. So Kimmy is in the background making sure that everything runs smoothly, but I wanted to give a big shout out to Kimmy and thank you so much for your support in this. So today, I am so excited about our conversation. I have been like looking forward to this for so long because there have been such huge movements happening around advocacy, around legislation that really matter to all of us in the Food Recovery Network space. And so I am just so thrilled to introduce to you all Jen Chandler. And you'll see why Jen is the exact right person we need to talk to about the upcoming conversation around the Food Donation Improvement Act and many other things. But I quickly wanted to just read a little bit more information about Jen so that you can all be introduced to Jen and get super excited about this conversation that we're all about to have. So Jen began her career on the Hill as an intern for Representative Richard Neal of Massachusetts and Representative Jim McGovern before actually joining the McGovern office as a legislative correspondent in 2007. See, the right person. And many of you might know the name Representative Jim McGovern because he was so instrumental in the passage of the Food Donation Improvement Act and was a co-sponsor for that, in fact. So Jen has also served as a legislative assistant and senior legislative assistant working on a variety of legislative areas, including hunger and health policy. So exciting. We're going to learn more about what that means. In the lead up to the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health this last fall, Jen returned to working on hunger and nutrition issues with her colleagues, Caitlin Hodgkins. Jen is originally from Sutton, Massachusetts, and currently lives in Arlington, Virginia, for those of you, Arlington, Virginia, with her husband and two young sons. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to talk with you. We have a lot to dig into. But for everyone listening in, your role of chief of staff, for Congressman Jim McGovern. Can you tell us, we heard a little bit about your background, but how did you come into that role? What is that role? What does a day look like for you?
Well, thank you, Regina. I am so excited to be here chatting with you today. Thank you so much to Kimmy for all the tech help and all the behind the scenes work that you do as well. I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, I a little bit about my background as you heard. After I went to Providence College, and after graduation, I was a poli-sci major. Came down to DC like so many people do. Wanted to do the DC thing for a little bit, went to grad school at American University, did some internships, some kind of odd jobs, as one does, and then was hired for Congress to work for Congressman McGovern as a legislative assistant. Or I'm sorry, as a legislative correspondent. I think I'm a little bit unusual, and then I've only ever worked really, full time on staff for one member and for my hometown member. I never envisioned that I would be in DC or on the Hill this long, but Congressman McGovern is an incredible member to work for. I am really passionate about the work that he does, especially in the hunger and health space. And here I am. I'm a lifer. As you heard, my family's down here too, and it's really just been an incredible experience. On as far as day to day, one of the things I love about working on the Hill is every day is a little bit different. Um, for example, like this morning, I was on Zooms already, talking about some of the congressman's work and upcoming bills he's about to introduce on school meals. I was on a call talking about a group's Farm Bill priorities. They work with veterans who are experiencing hunger and some of the things that they want to see in the upcoming Farm Bill. So there's some policy work. There's some overall strategy, what the congressman is doing, not just in the health and hunger and health and nutrition spaces, but also on foreign policy and on transportation and on education and on so many other issues as well. And then there's in the chief role, honestly, there's some of the admin stuff as well, budget and personnel and all that kind of stuff, which is a part of the job as well.
That is so amazing. You touched on so many things. Thank you for the introduction to yourself and your role. I actually forgot to mention that I was born and lived for a little while just north of where Representative McGovern, where his district is. So I'm a New Englander through and through. I
Love
mostly
it.
grew up in Maine, but yeah, but Massachusetts, that's where I was born. Not too far from you guys. So. Um, and also, Jen, we'll have to send to you later, but we have a chapter at Providence, and so we'll let you know how that chapter is going,
Oh,
how
I
they're
didn't
doing.
know that. I saw some
Yeah,
of the Worcester Mass schools,
yeah,
but I didn't realize Providence. Love it. Go
yep.
PC.
I know, right? It's so great. And we actually several years ago. I mean, I've been here at FRN for 7.5 years now, but several years ago we had an intern from Providence.
Oh,
So
great.
that was yeah, really fun. So nice little connection there. Um, And just for everyone listening in, again, I really want to emphasize that this is an ongoing conversation, not only with Jen, but also just in terms of advocacy, that we're hoping that, you'll become more familiar with Jen's role, and Congressman Jim McGovern's office, so that, these names begin to sound more familiar to you. We widen our aperture. Jen just talked about some of the other issues that are so important to Congressman Jim McGovern. And we'll talk a little bit too later on in the conversation about the Farm Bill. What is the Farm Bill? We'll just touch on it. And FRN will provide, content ongoing for everyone. So if you have questions that we don't touch on here in this specific conversation with Jen, just let us know, and we'll make sure that we can address these things for you. And Jen, when you talked about um, um, Congressman is also working on other issues outside of health and nutrition, including transportation. For Food Recovery Network, this is all about equality. People are food insecure because they are not financially, economically secure. And if you are food insecure, you oftentimes have other insecurities, transportation insecurity, being one of those things. And so I'm really excited to hear that, there's so many other topics that your office is working so diligently to ensure, thriving lives, not only for the folks, within in the district in Massachusetts, but, for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And these kinds of issues, be it hunger, nutrition security, housing security, making sure that folks are earning a living wage. I mean, these are issues that the congressman is passionate about and personally passionate about. I think this is something that I really respect about him, is that these ideas are coming from him. He is driving this conversation. He is sharing with staff, I want to be doing something on this. What can we be doing here? We need to do more here. I think, people sometimes get the wrong impression that it's staff driving their boss to introduce legislation on things. This is really the other way around. It is the congressman always thinking, what can we be doing? We're doing, we need to be doing something more here. We always joke in the office, if he has a long car ride or if he's under scheduled, he has some time between meetings. That's when what are we doing here? I read this article and can we be doing something like this? And something we love about him. But he is personally passionate about all of these issues. And he's really the one that's driving the conversation and pushing us as staff to think outside the box.
That is so incredible to hear. And again, I just encourage everyone, and I'm going to say it, multiple times, but, in this conversation, there's an opportunity to get to understand the role of Representative Jim McGovern, whether or not you are a constituent. And that might help prompt us to get to know other representatives, throughout Congress that do, represent us in our particular states, and get to hear what personally drives them. And I want to connect that back to the conversation we had with Angela Lynn, who was the moderator for the conversation all around voting, and the feelings that people might have when we get to know our elected officials. Are they walking in our values? Do they represent what it is that we want to strive for when we think about our lives? And so conversations like this can really help open up that aperture for all of us to see that. So Jen, thank you so much for that. It was really beautiful. Well, let's move into the main thrust of our conversation. We have a lot to celebrate around the passage of the Food Donation Improvement Act. So that passed in late December 2022. I can't believe we're, well into 2023 at this point. But Jen, I wanted to give you a lot of space to talk about the Food Donation Improvement Act, because you can give us a little bit of behind the scenes. This is a piece of legislation that literally involves everyone within the Food Recovery Network, every single person. So it's finally happened. Something federal has happened to help us, expand access to folks, increase access, and for Food Recovery Network to make food recovery the norm and not the exception. So I'm gonna pummel you with a bunch of different questions and topics, within this. But please just give us a wide breadth of your thoughts around. Talk to us about the Food Donation Improvement Act. How did it ultimately pass? How do you see that affecting the day-to-day lives of people within Food Recovery Network or other people? And what are your hopes for the Food Donation Improvement Act?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get into what the Food Donation Improvement Act is, let me just sort of talk a little bit about the process of how it got passed at the end of last Congress. It was a wild sort of classic, like end of the year push. We were trying to get it into the omnibus, which is the appropriations package, the must pass bill at the end of the year to fund the federal government. We thought we had it in there. Due to an unintentional clerical error, it was accidentally left out. And so there is about a 36-hour all hands on deck push to try to get the Senate to pass it and the House to pass it. There was all these phone calls happening. It was especially chaotic for me because I was at home quarantined with COVID. So doing this all over the phone, there was a commitment to get it done. It was an honest mistake that it was left out of the final package. So it was wild. And we're thrilled that it was included, or that it was passed and that President Biden signed it into law. But it was one of those, I feel like it was an episode of The West Wing, sort of, because it was just completely crazy. Phone calls and last minute edits and trying to work the legislative process to get it passed. So that being said, the bill itself is something that, again, really came from the congressman and conversations that he was having out at various organizations. A little bit sort of to step back on him. He's been passionate about ending hunger, both here in this country and abroad, for years. He's co-chair of the Bipartisan Hunger Caucus, and he led the effort for the White House to hold a White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. But as part of the lead up to the White House conference, one of the things that he was doing is he really went on this like nationwide hunger tour to talk to organizations across the country that are doing great work on hunger, on ending hunger, innovative models, to talk to people with lived experience. And the issue of food waste is something that came up over and over again, because, unfortunately in this country, we have both a hunger problem and a food waste problem. We have close to 40 million Americans who are experiencing hunger, but we also have, 35 to 40% of the food in this country we waste, and there's a mismatch there. So one of the things that he kept hearing was that there, or especially for smaller retailers, for small businesses, for small restaurants, for hospitals, even sometimes school food service programs, those sorts of things, they really wanted to donate more of the unused but perfectly good food that they had, but they were really concerned about liability protections. The bill, Emerson Good Samaritan Law, had been on the books for several years, but the guidance was a little murky on the legal protections. If you're a big retailer or a big operation, you have legal teams, you can sort of suss out, what needs to be done. You have a better handle on that. For some of the smaller retailers that wanted to do the right thing, it was just, they just didn't have the bandwidth of all the things that they had to think about, worrying about these legal protections. They just said, what, I'm a little, the guidance is a little shaky here. I don't want to get involved. I'm just going to, throw this food away. But they wanted to. So that's really kind of where this bill came from. Back in the 2018 Farm Bill, there was some language in there to try to provide for USDA to provide some more guidance, some more clarity on the Emerson Act, Good Samaritan laws. The guidance, there wasn't, there was still needed to be more done. So this is where this bill came from. And the two big provisions of the final text that passed was, one, it makes it easier for organizations, your hospitals, your schools, small businesses, to donate good food directly to individuals. So say, a hospital or a small restaurant or even a school food service provider, they have extra fresh produce left over from the week. They want to give it to, families in need who they know, might come pick their kids up or might come in for whatever. And they can give that directly to them. Under the old guidance, food had to be donated directly to a nonprofit organization. The other piece here is that it extends some of these liability protections to food that food recovery organizations will then sell for a nominal fee. And so one of the things we're hearing is a lot of organizations have sprung up, incredible organizations across the country. We have one, Lovin' Spoonfuls, in Massachusetts, that will take in this donated food and then distribute it, whether it's through like home delivered meals, whether it's to food banks or to other organizations. But it costs something, the transportation costs, the labor costs, all that. So they can charge a nominal fee basically for the handling of these programs. And so that donated food is now covered by these liability protections as well. And so hopefully that will allow these kinds of organizations to expand their service model further. So we are very excited. Again, President Biden signed it into law back in January. We know there's still a little work to be done in this space. USDA, we know we've had conversations we've had with them. They need to provide some additional guidance, some regulations on, the implementation of this new law. We know of all the things that they are doing that, it may take a little while. So it's actually great conversations like this help to sort of show that there is interest. And we know a lot of other groups are talking to USDA and saying like, okay, we need to make this a priority. We need to get these regs done because people are interested. So it's a huge first step. The work's not done yet, but it is a huge boost of momentum to make donating food and food recovery organizations, just to allow them to have a little bit more certainty in this whole process.
Thank you so much for that, Jen. And for everyone listening in, there was a lot of information that Jen just provided to all of us. And, a couple of responses to that, which are, if we think about the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Law that was enacted in 1996, many people listening in on this conversation weren't even born yet, which is, something to really consider when we think about where were we as a nation 27 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when it came to recovering food. We hadn't even put our arms around the sheer amount of food that we were wasting. We hadn't even been able to identify the problem. And here was this law that said, you can donate food, but just thinking about, for everyone listening in, think about all of the, flash forward to today, flash forward to maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, and some of the pushback that we still receive because people are uncertain about liability. So the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Law was really so cutting edge to support this methodology, to support this value when we really weren't quite sure what was happening, what the problems were. We certainly don't think knew how much food waste was contributing to global warming. And so now, with the passage of the Food Donation Act, Jen, I'm thinking too, like a lot of people want very specific answers, but we might not necessarily have those specific answers yet because we need to do the work. We need to start recovering the food, and with love and gently begin to make very plain the pathway that we can walk down or go down around recovering food.
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think food waste, the issue of food waste in general is relatively new to sort of the national conversation. I mean, there have been organizations and nonprofits on the ground throughout the country that have been doing incredible work in this space for a long time. But even as somebody who's worked on ag issues and hunger and nutrition issues for a while, it really wasn't until a few years ago that the issue of food waste sort of rose to the national conversation. There's some language in the 2018 Farm Bill. There's been members of Congress. I know, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree from Maine has been incredibly active in this space and has really been driving the conversation forward on this. But I think its time is finally here. People are interested in it. People are realizing the mismatch that we have with all this perfectly good unused food. We need to do a better job of either, if sort of we ourselves are not going to use it, then somebody could. And I'm really glad that this piece of the hunger, nutrition, environmental sort of conversation is coming up in a way that it just was kind of below the surface for so long.
Absolutely. And Jen, you've used the term mismatch, a couple of times now, and that's exactly what it is. And, a shout out to all of our student leaders listening in, that you've understood that mismatch from the very beginning, and the, co-founders of Food Recovery Network, 2011, understood and felt that mismatch. And that the Food Donation Improvement Act is going to help us to course correct that mismatch. And so for everyone listening in, we are going to have subsequent conversations because I know you have some very, very, very specific questions about, protections when it comes to your partner agencies. So these are the amazing nonprofits that receive the food. When they serve that food, can they be held? Are they also, protected under the liability law of the FDIA? Are the organizations that donate the food, um, when they donate the food to organizations that maybe are not a 501c3, so maybe are not a nonprofit, which the Bill Emerson law required that you gave the food in good faith to another nonprofit. Well, the Food Donation Improvement Act allows us to give food to individuals. What does that actually look like? Um, and I know a lot of you had questions around, does this FDIA coupled with, and excuse me everyone for my tech issues here, um, real life recording, here we go. So many of you had questions about, the FDIA and the existing Bill Emerson law in combination. Does that, supersede state laws around food donation and liabilities? We'll get into all of that. And so I just want everyone to know. But right now, we really do want to celebrate this amazing achievement, this bipartisan achievement that is going to allow us, as I said earlier, that access to more food recovery. And so everyone, again, sorry for the tech issues here. But when I was talking with Jen about this conversation that we were going to have earlier, with the FDIA, one of the things that it talks about in terms of liability is with our, that if you are a producer, that you are now protected under FDIA. And for us, at Food Recovery Network, that means our farmers. And I said to Jen, preparing for this conversation, I was like, I don't know if there's a question there, but we just want to celebrate farmers. So Jen, I wanted to turn that over to you just to be like, yay.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that Congressman McGovern, so he serves in the Agriculture Committee, one of the things that, well, and I'll back up and say, he asked to serve on the Ag Committee probably 13 or so years ago because of his work on hunger and nutrition. But one of the things that he has learned with his district in Massachusetts, so it's central and western Massachusetts, is just how many small farmers there are in Massachusetts. And every year he does a farm tour in August, and usually it's about 2 days, and he tours, somewhere between like 10 and 15 farms. And it's just incredible the work that they are doing. It's incredible the issues that they raise with him. And these are small farmers. Some of them are century farms. They've been in operation for over 100 years with the same family, fourth, fifth generation of the family running the farm, and just the issues that they raise to him, and food donation and food waste is one. Especially in Massachusetts, we have these small specialty crop farmers. They grow everything from eggplant and lettuce and beans and corn, and they sell them at farmers markets, and it stands into institutions all throughout the region, really. But again, if they have donated or they have unused food that they want to donate, there was always this ambiguity here. And again, we talk about these smaller operations where they want to do the right thing. They just need a little clarity. And of all the things that they have to worry about on a day-to-day basis, if they're going to be sued for donating, unused produce, but perfectly good, is not one of the things that they want to have to worry about. So yes, just a huge shout out to farmers. They're the backbone of this whole system. And they're doing so many innovative things and really contributing to nutrition, nutritional quality, and this whole system of, we have an abundance of certain things, making sure that it gets to the right people.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And so many of our student leaders listening in, I know many of you do recover from farmers markets, and you have the opportunity to meet firsthand with farmers and farm hands, and making sure that fresh produce, which is so valuable that you make sure that that gets over to your partner agencies. And so I think a lot of this that Jen just mentioned will resonate with so many of you. And as I move us further along into the conversation, I did just want to note to everyone, again, just in terms of on ramps and becoming a little bit more familiar in a gentle conversation with the inner workings of Congress. Jen had mentioned a couple of things, a couple of areas that Representative Jim McGovern is engaged in. And one of those things being the Bipartisan Hunger Caucus. So if you hadn't heard about the Hunger Caucus before, that might be something that you want to Google and look into. You might want to see if your elected officials are part of that hunger caucus. And then the ad committee. So all of our representatives, they sit on several committees. And so that's another area that you might want to dig into a little bit more. So again, we are not overwhelming ourselves, not feeling like we have to do it all and do it all today, but that we have more exposure to these certain terms, these certain ways of inner workings, so that we can understand a bit more, what our elected officials are engaged in. So Jen, thank you for that, education.
Absolutely. And just a note on the Hunger Caucus. So the Congressman McGovern and Congressman Tracy Mann, a Republican from Kansas, just relaunched the House Hunger Caucus about a week and a half ago for this Congress. So every Congress, we sort of have a relaunch. Our Republican co-chair was the late Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, who sadly died in a car accident last summer. She was an incredible champion she was Congressman McGovern's Republican lead co-sponsor on the Food Donation Improvement Act. She was the co-chair of the Hunger Caucus with him. She co-led the effort for the White House conference. So these are bipartisan issues. And as Vaibhav will say, we don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And where we can work together on these kinds of issues, he really wants to. So I would definitely encourage you to, see if your member is a member of the House Hunger Caucus. We're trying to build our membership as we go into this Farm Bill year, and it's a pretty easy ask. Again, it's bipartisan. It's really focused on educating members and congressional staff about these issues. And we're already talking about doing some kind of panel on food waste later on this year. So these issues resonate on both sides of the aisle.
And just again, everyone listening in, we'll keep in touch with Jen so that when that panel conversation happens around food waste, we'll make sure that everyone hears about it and knows that when they can listen in on that panel conversation. So Jen, this fall, this September, was the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. A huge moment. And I wanted to turn things over to you to, walk us through why that was such an important moment, what this conference was. But before I do that, I wanted to, give a shout out that Food Recovery Network, we were in the room, during this conference. It was a big deal for us to be there. I was there, and I was joined by some of our student leaders, Rafer Hunter Shelby, and the president of our Student and Alumni Advisory Board, President Diraj Bandaru, who, when I'd mentioned earlier, everyone listening in, just to keep tying in all of these different threads, Diraj actually was the person who interviewed Stephanie over at the World Wildlife Fund, or WWF. And, Diraj talked about what it meant for him to be in that room, to understand, finally, the process of what it means to work within the federal government. And it really changed his perspective on, what had felt like a very opaque process, to have that insight, and to really begin to feel and internalize, advocacy as a tool. So it was a really wonderful conversation. And again, plenty of on-ramps within that conversation. But Jen, can you tell us a bit more about the White House Conference on Hunger, Health, and Nutrition? What was the role, you touched on it a little bit, what the role of Representative Jim McGovern was in making that happen? All the things.
Yeah, sure. So prior to last September, the only White House conference on hunger was in 1969 during the Nixon administration. So 1969, right? Well before any of us were born, the year we put a man on the moon. Um, but there was a White House led conference to address the issue of hunger in this country. And some really big things came out of it. The WIC program, for example, came out of that 69 conference. There was a lot of areas where the school lunch and school meals program were strengthened. So there's a lot of really good work that came out of that. And I think, immediately following that conference, there was a sense that, okay, we can end hunger in this country. And then the issue sort of took a back seat to many other issues that were coming up. And so for probably 15 years or so, Congressman McGovern had been pushing for a second White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition. And I can say that at the end of the Obama administration, for example, I was in meetings with him when he was pushing then Secretary Vilsack, who was the Ag Secretary during the Obama administration, to host another White House conference on hunger. And quite frankly, we just sort of ran out of time. And there wasn't quite the political appetite, if you will, to host a conference like this. Fast forward to 2 years ago, at the start of the Biden administration, the issues of hunger, nutrition, and health were just much more prevalent in sort of everyday conversations. And I think, one thing that the Congressman McGovern always says is that, the COVID pandemic didn't cause the hunger problem in this country, it exacerbated it. And I think for a lot of people, one of the lasting images at the beginning of COVID was lines at food banks and food pantries, people who never, ever thought that they would find themselves in that situation. And there was a sense of so many groups and really young people too, that were driving these conversations and saying, hold on, we should be doing more here. There was the political will and sort of the political appetite to host a conference like this. So the congressman had been pushing this for years. Again, like I said, Congresswoman Jackie Walorski was really a true partner in this effort. Senator Cory Booker, Senator Mike Braun, they were pushing this effort as well. And it finally happened. And it really was what Congressman McGovern's vision was to get everybody in the room, every level of government, federal, state, local, nonprofit communities, healthcare, businesses, universities, young people, and especially people with lived experience who had faced hunger, who had faced poverty, who were interacting with programs like SNAP and WIC every day, and that had real life experience of what was actually working. Sometimes we have these policy conversations, while very well intentioned, but don't really take into account what people are facing every day, and the seemingly small, annoyances of programs, of, one program not interacting with another program or something like that, that really, on a day-to-day basis, can be problematic. So he was thrilled that people with lived experience were featured prominently at the conference, were there. I will say I got a phone call from a sort of well-connected DC lobbyist to sort of complain that there were too many people with lived experience on the guest list and not enough DC people. And for my boss, that was the best kind of complaint to get, because it really was, his intention to have a lot of people with lived experience there personally sharing their stories, sharing what works. And the Biden-Harris administration, really did a deep dive in bringing all the relevant people to the table. And not only that, is that, it was a one-day conference. There was a national strategy, a plan to end hunger in this country by 2030. But that infrastructure leading up to the conference is still there. The Domestic Policy Council, chaired by Ambassador Susan Rice, still has that working group intact. They are still meeting and working on next steps to actually carrying out and implementing that strategy. We know a lot of the interagency working groups. There's an interagency task force on hunger and food security that has, I think it's up to like 25 agencies right now. They are still working really hard and meeting regularly to try to come up, or to try to fulfill their commitments in the national strategy. We know several items in the national strategy have already been ticked off. We have a permanent summer EBT coming for this summer, where families that receive SNAP, they get a bump up on their EBT cards in the summer, when we know, for example, that childhood hunger is often worse because kids aren't receiving school meals like they regularly would during the school year. We know there have been WIC updates already. Food Donation Improvement Act, addressing food waste, that was passed. So these things are happening. There's still a lot of work to be done, but the momentum is there. The political will is there. And this food waste piece is really a big piece of it. And we hope this moment feels different than in past years, where there's, okay, yeah, we'll do it, and nothing happened. It feels different. There's actually things happening right now.
Jen, whoo! I just need to take a breath with all of that. Thank you. I agree. And everyone listening in, Jen started her career in all of this, so for Jen to say things feel different, I believe Jen. Jen does this day in and day out. And just again, everyone listening in, we should see ourselves and feel ourselves as part of that momentum. Now that we have the Food Donation Improvement Act, you've been all across the US, been recovering food and making sure to increase access to food for those in your community who are suffering from food insecurity and hunger. And so what can we do, little by little, to help continue to push that momentum forward to eradicate hunger? Jen, one of the things that we heard when we were in the room during the conference was from President Biden, who said, you know what, this is going to take all of us. It is literally, and so hearing, this wonderful compliment about the lived experience, because these are the folks, it's all of us with our lived experience who are trying to recover food, who are trying to start businesses and pay people a wage that is fair to them, all of these things. It does take all of us to participate. And so I just wanted to, highlight that based on, what you were saying around the construction of the conference, and why it was just so critical that we, shared this space together.
Yeah, absolutely. And people with lived experience are still very much a part of the next steps of implementing the national strategy, of these conversations, be it on hunger or food waste specifically. And so I'm really happy to see, and I know the congressman is, to see that those conversations are still happening and those folks are still included.
Yes, and I mean, just a testament to that, during the conference, there were breakout sessions all throughout the day, so that we could all raise our voices and our opinions. And the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, came and talked to everybody, and actually, spent time at each of these individual, tables. So I just think a testament to the invitation, that we all really need to be involved with this. So, for all of us, again, trying to pull down in our everyday lives what the Food Donation Improvement Act can mean for us, means that we're being vocal. It means that we are asking questions. It means that we are trying to get more resources to provide clarity, because we need to make that clarity ourselves. This is a brand new piece of legislation that is trying to provide, guideposts for all of us to do the right thing with our surplus food. Now, all of you, listening in, we're already doing the right thing, but we need to get more and more people involved in that. And one other thing that I'll highlight, when Jen, you'd mentioned that before this conversation that happened in September, the last time, the White House had gathered around a conversation like this was during the Nixon administration. When we talked about the creation of WIC and SNAP. We'd had a conversation with Emily Broadleib of the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, and again, I know Jen and I were singing the praises of the director of that clinic, Emily Broadleib. With Emily, we'd had a conversation about, these different quilt work patches of, state benefits, federal benefits, WIC and SNAP, and how this all comes together, hopefully comes together to decrease, hunger and food insecurity in the United States. And FRN, we lent our voice to the fact that a lot of people don't know that many people who are in college, college students, have the ability to sign up for SNAP,
Mhm.
so that we can help people while you're trying to get your higher education. Sometimes there just isn't enough money at the end of the month for food, for paying rent, for getting books, whatever those things might be. So we thought that was a really important conversation to have, with the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic,
Yeah,
around
and just
that.
on that, on college hunger, I
Yeah.
think this is another issue that is relatively new to the national conversation around hunger. It's always been there. And I think people are shocked sometimes at so many college campuses have food pantries now. Because and it's not always colleges that you would expect either. And it's a real struggle. The cost of college is incredibly expensive. And if you're juggling, multiple, part-time jobs or work study or family obligations or in schoolwork, whatever, it can be a real struggle. So this is definitely an issue that I know other members of Congress, and my boss is very supportive of. Some of the others are sort of leading the effort here on doing a better job to address college hunger in the upcoming Farm Bill. And this is another area where, again, I think it's because students have spoken up and said, hey, this is a real problem. And, we need better resources and better support here. And this is another area where I think, young people can, again, share their stories and speak up in a way that they have a very impactful voice in this conversation.
I love that. And it's so true. And so much of the work that we do at Food Recovery Network around educating people around, yes, you can donate food. The other piece that we work on is, busting myths around, this whole romanticized concept of the starving college student. No, these are people who are home insecure and food insecure, and they are just trying to make it work. And we need to be horrified by that,
Mhm.
instead of just, thinking that it was a bohemian romantic way to live life as we're trying to, get our higher education. And again, big kudos to our students who, um, several years ago, Jen, as you just mentioned, the idea of college student food insecurity becoming more and more, um, um, the awareness, it was always there, like you said, but the awareness was becoming more and more common. So many of our chapters, when they wanted to start a Food Recovery Network chapter, would say, well, can we actually keep the food on our college campus, and contribute to our food pantry or start a food pantry? That became more and more of the resources that our students wanted. And so again, for everyone listening in, we hear you. We literally hear you, and we stand in solidarity with you, to alleviate, some of these real stresses that people, have. Now, Jen, and again, ongoing conversations, because we could go on and on. We could talk, I think, for years to come. But you had mentioned a few times, this concept of the Farm Bill. And I just wondered if you could just, maybe, if we could take that step back, as you've done before, for us with the Food Donation Improvement Act, and maybe just talk a little bit about the Farm Bill. What is it, and what is your role, and then therefore, Congressman McGovern's role within this thing called the Farm Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. So every 5 years, the Farm Bill comes up for reauthorization, which is basically like an opportunity for Congress to look at all of the programs within the Farm Bill and say, this is working well. We need to adjust this. We need to add here, that sort of thing. And Farm Bill is might not even really be the most appropriate name for it, but it includes all of the sort of traditional farm programs for commodities, for crop insurance. When you think about a working farm, for um, grant programs, specialty crops, commodities, all of the programs that provide assistance there. But it also includes a whole lot of our federal nutrition programs, specifically the SNAP program, the TFAP program, which is food to food banks, um, fruit and veggie programs, other produce prescription or other produce programs. So it really encompasses a little bit of everything. And these programs are reauthorized every 5 years. It is probably the most important piece of legislation that the agriculture committees in Congress consider. And again, Congressman McGovern is on the House Agriculture Committee, and it's really a way to shape policy going forward.
Thank you so much for that overview. And for everyone listening in, we will continue to have more conversations around the Farm Bill and the role that all of you play in this thing called the Farm Bill. And I agree, Jen, people have asked me a lot of times, like, is the Farm Bill the right term for this thing? And maybe not. But what's inside of it, definitely affects all of our lives. And so thank you so much for that. We're winding down on our conversation today. And I just had one more, global, comment before I turn things over to you to, walk us through some of the things that you want all of us to know about. I know you've touched on so many things, but either just a recap or, other things that Congressman McGovern is working on. But soon enough, there's going to be a rally here in Washington, D.C., all around canceling college student debt at the federal level. And at Food Recovery Network, we've done a lot of put out a lot of content around this concept of what does it mean to cancel college student debt? We're going to have a whole entire panel conversation about it. And I just wanted to hear from you, Jen. Where does the congressman stand on this concept of canceling college student debt? It's not the thrust of the conversation, but just wanted to hear from you. Like, what are you hearing in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. He is fully supportive of canceling college debt. He's frustrated, quite frankly, that the Biden administration sort of program is stuck in legal limbo right now, awaiting a Supreme Court decision. But he is fully supportive of canceling student debt, whether that be all of it or some percentage of it. He's heard for just way too long about the high cost of college, and it should not be that cost prohibitive. And so he's with you. He's talked to so many students across his district, and their, struggles of, paying for college and making it all work and, figuring out this piece and that piece. And not only just students, but adults in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are still paying down their student loans. And so he's right there with you. And hopefully, this will be resolved in a way that is really beneficial, hopefully.
Great. Thank you for that, Jen. And as I mentioned, at FRN, we're going to dig deep into this concept because, there's a lot of people who have thoughts and ideas around what does it mean, if I paid and, for my college and now it's going to get relieved for so many other people. If we cancel college debt now, what does that mean 3 years from now when people begin to enter into the college system that's happening every single year? So we'll look at all of that. But for now, just know that again, we see you. People are really struggling, as Jen said, to make it all work, to make our lives work. And for Food Recovery Network, again, this means economic security. And so whether that is through increasing the federal minimum wage, Jen had talked about, some of these other areas that help support a thriving life. We want to hear from all of you too, again, in shaping subsequent conversations, but also in all of this that, we talked about with Jen. what resonated for you? What did you feel? What further questions do you have? Be in touch, let us know, because we want to make sure that you have the answers and the resources that you need, whether it's to continue to conduct your food recoveries, to expand your food recoveries, to really dig into advocacy and education, whatever it might be. We're here for you, and these conversations are a testament to that, as an offering of support, in the ways that we see you every single day working so hard. So Jen, to conclude, our time together, and again, thank you so much for your time. We know how very busy you are. We were just wondering, if you could let us know, what are you, and therefore, Congressman Jim McGovern working on right now? What are you excited about? What can young voters be on the lookout from your office? And how can we continue to be engaged with your office, whether or not we are a constituent?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about these issues. I love talking to young people, and sort of anything I can to sort of demystify the process here in Congress. Just a couple things the congressman is working on. I mean, one, as I said, we're in a farm bill year. And I think, Regina, you had mentioned it earlier about one of the things through Food Recovery Network is trying to correct the myth about the college student maybe facing food insecurity. And I think that is something that my boss is really trying to do as we go into this farm bill process, whether that be on college student hunger, whether that be SNAP benefits for single adults, able-bodied adults without dependents, as they're typically called, and sort of these myths around the program. So his going into this farm bill year, his sort of line in the sand is don't make hunger worse in this country. And we'll see what the farm bill looks like, what a draft bill looks like, but he wants to make sure, as he has in the past, that we don't make hunger worse in this country. Not only that, but he wants to build on the recommendations in the White House's national strategy coming out of the White House conference. So he's, again, having so many conversations focused on like, okay, what's the plan for this part of the strategy? Working with different agencies, finding out what they're doing. Where do we need to coordinate? Those kinds of things. So there's a lot of work and a lot of sort of follow-up work there. But he's really, really committed to making sure that we don't make hunger worse in this farm bill, that we correct any false narratives out there about who's on SNAP, and what the benefits may mean to them, those kinds of things, and also making sure that we're really implementing the national strategy in a well thought out way going forward. Some other things he's working on, he will probably very soon introduce a bill on increasing the reimbursement rates for school meals for K through 12 students. He's very passionate about universal school meals for everyone. We saw this during the COVID pandemic, where school meals were free, and what a huge positive impact they had on a lot of kids whose families were really struggling. It's also schools appreciate the streamlined implementation of the program. They're not tracking all this kind of paperwork and that sort of thing. So that's something he's very engaged on right now. He also has a medically tailored meals bill to call for Medicare to do a pilot on expanding medically tailored meals. So these are meals that are specifically designed for folks who are undergoing health challenges. Maybe they're going through chemo, maybe they're dealing with heart disease, to make sure that they get the very specific nutrients that they need to help them in their recovery. Food can be preventative, but it also can be curative, and to making sure that food is medicine. So those are some things that he's working on. Again, like I said, he's always doing a million things at a million different times. And it's great to work for a boss like that, because he is so engaged. And I guess it just sort of, my message to all the students out here too is keep doing what you're doing. Know that you're a really important part of this whole process. And truly, the reason that issues like food waste are part of the national conversation and part of the White House conference is in a big way because students pushed the issue and said, we're doing these things on our college campuses. This is an issue. This is an area where we think there needs to be more work done. And this is where we can help. So thank you for that. And just in terms of working with Congress, don't be intimidated by the process. It can feel intimidating, but know who your members of Congress are. Don't be afraid to call their office and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about this issue or that issue. And again, just stay engaged. Don't be intimidated, because it can feel overwhelming, but it's we don't have all the answers up here, and we need to hear from people like yourselves on the ground who are doing this day in and day out. So, and we really appreciate that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen. And I have to say, I agree. Don't be intimidated. Elected officials, they're ours. There are, in terms of we
Mhm.
elected them, the process is ours. And so you deserve to be part of that. And you know what I did? I just called up um, the office of Representative Jim McGovern, and I happened to be, patched over to Jen. So they really do, they pick up, you know? And I was able to have a conversation with Jen, and that led to this larger conversation for all of you here. So it's ours. This whole process is ours. So thank you so much for that, Jen. And again, thank you for your time. And just so everyone knows, listening in, this conversation with Jen, as I'd mentioned, is part of many different conversations that we've had. So please do, go to our website, go to our YouTube channel. You'll see tons of conversations to help us, see ourselves in this process, and to, we can still feel intimidated. We certainly can. We don't want anyone to feel any kind of way, but within that, we can still feel like, and I can still pick up the phone and call, or I can still send off that email. It's just so important. And we have many, many, many other conversations coming up. And so I just want to make sure everyone knows that we are going to talk with Tony's Chocolate. And so this is an incredible organization, an incredible chocolate company that I adore. And we're actually going to have two conversations with Tony's Chocolate. The first is around equity. And, Jen and I talked all throughout this conversation around equity, access to food. Food is a right, food has value. How can we, make things work so that we can live our lives? That's all about equity. And so we're going to talk with Tony's Chocolate about equity in the chocolate making process, because a lot of the bigger corporations, they are using forced unpaid labor as part of how they make chocolate. And Tony's Chocolate said, we are not doing that. We are making a different kind of product that is full infused with equity. And then we're also going to talk about a second conversation with Tony's all around sustainability. And what does it mean to have an international company that supports sustainability? What kind of jobs are there? What's important to Tony's? So again, I know many of you are, varying places in your college journey. Many of you will be graduating and looking for places to work. And so it's just helpful to understand, what kind of roles are out there at organizations, companies like Tony's Chocolate, in the sustainability world, and in lots of other places too. So be on the lookout for that. And then also be on the lookout for your invitation to our March Roundtable Talk. This is where we will talk about the progress of our work at Food Recovery Network since July to the present day, the present moment. What have we been able to accomplish so far? So let's celebrate that. Let's reflect on our learnings, and then we'll talk about where we plan on going for the remainder of this program year through the summer. So we really want to make sure that you participate in that conversation, give us feedback, ask us your questions. This conversation is for all of you. Jen, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much. I got super invigorated. I feel a bit better in terms of my role in the process. So thank you so much for spending some time with us and really helping us all on our education journey.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything in the future, whether it's policy related or otherwise. Like I said, I'm passionate about working on these issues, but also about sort of demystifying the process of Congress, making sure that people feel like they can participate and have their voices heard. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything in the future. And thank
And
you.
we will, thank you, Jen. We will absolutely take you up on that offer. And thank you again. Thanks for everyone listening. We look forward to seeing
You.
you at our next conversation. And in the meantime, peace and love to everyone. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.